My name is Andi Brierley. I'm a lived experience author of 2 youth justice books. This is a short exploration of the link between childhood trauma and offending behaviour. My first book, Your Honour, Can I Tell You My Story, is a personal account of my own journey of navigating intergenerational trauma, as if my mum was a 16-year-old in care when she fell pregnant with me, my own experience of abuse and neglect, which unfortunately led to my care experience, school exclusion, heroin addiction, child criminal exploitation, and eventually 4 prison sentences between the ages of 17 to 23. My second book, Connecting with Young People in Trouble, Risk, Relationships and Lived Experience, is a combination of all these experiences brought together with developing theory and science as well as practice. As I have now had the privilege of qualifying in and working within the youth justice system for 15 years, primarily with the most prolific, serious and persistent young people involved in offending behaviour. However, in the latter years, working directly with children looked after and care leavers in the youth justice system, a group of children exposed to vast amounts of childhood trauma and adversity. Against all odds, I am now a university teacher delivering an unlocked master's degree to newly qualified prison officers, developing skills in them I required in my time of need. So what is trauma, now that we're all talking about it? Trauma is described by Gabor Mate, a Canadian physician and renowned author, as not what happens to us, but what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us. This makes complete sense to me and explains why trauma affects us all in different ways. Childhood trauma is traumatic events experienced in childhood that negatively impact on a child's mental, medical or physical health. Vincent Folletti's Adverse Childhood Experiences study is one of many that has developed knowledge about the lifelong negative impact of childhood trauma on the life course. Further studies since then, including Jack Shonkoff's work for the Harvard Center of the Developing Child, explored the science behind the lifelong impact. Such studies have explained that toxic stress causes profound biological challenges for a developing child. Not positive, everyday stress, which is good for human development, especially for developing resilience to acute threats as we grow into adulthood. Toxic stress is when children are exposed to high levels or doses of adversity such as poverty, violence and social rejection, which activate stress response systems for prolonged periods, especially when it takes place in the absence of attachment to positive, reliable, nurturing and caring adults that can help buffer or mitigate the experience. Further studies undertaken by childhood trauma experts such as Dr. Bruce Perry, the author of the wonderful book What Happened to You, have found the timing of adversity is also critical. Although the brain is malleable throughout the life course, it is highly sensitive at specific stages such as 3 months and even at adolescence. So does childhood trauma cause offending behaviour? The obvious answer to this question is no. No one factor in life is a causal factor for offending, but let's explore whether childhood trauma contributes to offending behaviour in some cases, and if so, how can we respond appropriately to acknowledge this for those that need it in a criminal justice context. Bessel van der Kolk is the author of the amazing book The Body Keeps the Score and an expert psychiatrist in post-traumatic stress disorder. He explains 3 problems that we primarily see with those with untreated childhood trauma. The first of the problem is attention. The inability to focus on or engage with tasks in a steady and consistent way. Very important when it comes to complying with primary and secondary education, and goes some way to explain the Ministry of Justice data in 2016, which highlighted that 42% of the adult prison population were permanently excluded from school, just as I was. The second problem that Bessel outlines is affect regulation. The inability to manage powerful emotions, and once they are activated or triggered, results in dysregulation. These individuals find it difficult to return to their baseline, which he calls hijacking. He explains that untraumatized individuals will regulate quickly and return to normal everyday activities. In seeking solutions to this affect regulation issue, people often create chronic adaptations such as drug or alcohol addictions, self-harm and eating disorders. Again, going some way to explaining the drug issues with many within our adult prison population, especially those 24% of care-experienced prisoners. The third problem, according to Bessel, is relationships. If someone has messed with you or hurt you as a child with no protection, you may position yourself in what is perceived to be an unsafe world in ways that keep you safe. This can be arrogant, aggressive, or even violent, or compliant, because if you stand up for yourself, terrible things may happen. This helps me better understand the violence, stress, and bullying I experienced while in prison and those unfortunate souls that took that journey with me. Many that enter the criminal justice system, and in particular the prison system, have experienced social rejection, inequality, discrimination, prejudice and racism, often from birth. Coming into a system that isolates and stigmatises through risk assessment processes and labels compounds that feeling of social rejection. These experiences of toxic stress do not excuse or justify crime. They simply provide context to the behaviour that often sits behind crime. Therefore, taking a journey alongside people to work together in a collaborative way is more likely to find solutions for many that find their way into the prison system and do not fully understand the why. Being convicted of a crime does not mean the harms that people have experienced should be ignored or not fully understood. The science explains that the key ingredient to trauma is a lack of relational resource. Therefore, using the relational sphere to hold space with the people we are working with to alleviate feelings of shame and guilt creates connections with themselves and attachments with others so that they can believe in humanity, compassion and love. If we believe that people with convictions can make a positive contribution to society, they are far more likely to believe it themselves. It is important to understand why people behave as they do, so we can better help them understand themselves and their behaviour. Trauma-informed practice is not only knowing about the impact of trauma, but the most important element is how we are with those that have experienced childhood trauma. Let's be kind, even with those that struggle at times to demonstrate kindness. This is the very essence of trauma-informed practice.